Good morning and Shabbat Shalom, my friends. Thank you for spending this time with me. I thought we'd study some Torah together this morning since I believe this week's portion communicates an insight especially relevant in these difficult times. The opening verses of our portion present us with two really troubling issues. The first, I think, would be obvious to most of us, but the second is more difficult for us to identify since it is hiding in plain sight. Let's see if you can find it. On the 8th day, Moses called Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. He said to Aaron, "Take a calf of the herd for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering, perfect and without blemish, and bring them before the Lord. Speak to the Israelite people and say to them, bring a he-goat for a sin offering, a calf and a lamb, yearlings perfect and without blemish for a burnt offering." Now, the idea of sacrificing innocent animals to atone for our sins may certainly offend our modern sensibilities, and some of us may even be repulsed by the very idea of slaughtering an animal to make right what we have done wrong. Now, however troubling this may be, we can at least be comforted in knowing we ceased sacrificing animals long ago. But what about that second issue, the one hiding in plain sight? That second issue is even more disturbing since it has never been resolved and in fact has grown worse over the centuries. Now consider what qualified an animal to be worthy of being slaughtered. It had to be perfect and without blemish. Now the idea of perfection, making an animal appropriate for sacrifice, is really disturbing for many reasons, not the least of which is because it contradicts and defies our tradition's fundamental and foundational belief that every individual must be held responsible and accountable for our own misdeeds. The idea that only an animal perfect and without blemish is worth sacrificing just doesn't fit with the rest of Jewish tradition. I think Rabbi Harold Kushner was absolutely correct when he said, perfection is simply not a Jewish value. Now, while perfectionism may not be a Jewish value, it may still be a value for many Jews. And that's not so good for us, especially now. Dr. David Aronson, a clinical psychologist at the Children's Clinic, says this: perfectionism and the coronavirus are not a healthy mix. Now is the time to practice forgiveness and self-compassion. There is no playbook for this. Remember, you're doing the best you can in a very difficult time, and this is critical. Remember to cut yourself some slack. Good advice. People who expect perfection from themselves and others often complain of exhaustion, and when depleted, we become sitting ducks for becoming ill, especially when exposed to viruses, because chronic stress compromises the immune system to a very profound degree. Perfectionists are often very good at many things, but self-care is often not one of them. Perhaps one of the most dangerous consequences of perfectionism is the frustration and anger that often accompanies it. Perfectionists may find it difficult to experience satisfaction, joy, and contentment. This is not what our faith nor God would want for us. In Judaism, a mitzvah is still beautiful, even if it isn't perfect. Some people won't do a mitzvah unless it's perfect, and as a result, never get around to doing any mitzvot at all. God doesn't ask for perfection. What God does require of us is to do justice, love kindness, and to walk humbly with God. No mention of perfection. Our challenge is to face the imperfections of the world and try to heal them. And perfectionism may actually keep us from doing just that. I really like the comedian Stephen Wright's take on all of this. He said, when I was in school, the teachers told me Practice makes perfect. Then they told me nobody's perfect. So I stopped practicing. And that may be the saddest consequence of perfectionism. We stop practicing, trying to make the world better. Not perfect, better. I am reminded of this lesson every year on Passover. I take out my old Maxwell House of God. It's covered with wine stains, it's roasted stains. And written in the margins are the names of my aunts and uncles, my cousins, the names of my grandparents, and parents are written there, as well as the dates of their deaths. Now, to some it may look like a tattered old pamphlet, but for me, it is a history of the love I've been blessed to know, a book of remembrance, the most precious book in my possession. Certainly not perfect, but certainly beautiful and precious to me. Perhaps Leonard Cohen was referring to this when he wrote, "So ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything, for that is how the light gets in." May this Shabbat, every Shabbat, and may all the days of our lives be illumined by that kind of light. Shabbat Shalom.